Well, what a cycle of events we've created here on this YouTube channel. I toil away at creating video tutorials on menopause. You watch the videos in order. You learn everything you need to know in order to connect all the dots, and that enables you to manage your menopause your way. But you just keep coming back to learn more and more and more. It's like a never-ending cycle. And that's because no matter how much you learn, there will always be some things that are unknown or new to you. I just love cycles that make sense. Cycles. What I don't understand is why a cycle becomes a sickle when you combine it with a prefix. Bi plus cycle becomes bicycle. Tri plus cycle becomes tricycle. Why is that? Well, in any case, we'll be talking about a cycle today, the life cycle of your ovaries. We've touched on it a bit in the last video, but not enough for the lessons you'll need later in this unit. This is a unit on epithelial ovarian cancer, and I started this unit with video number 413, in which I taught you about the role your ovaries play in your entire reproductive tract. Then in video number 414, I taught you about how your ovaries function as egg and hormone factories. Well, now it's time for you to understand the entire life cycle of your ovaries. This is the most critical thing for understanding epithelial ovarian cancer. Now, while all of chapter 32 is on epithelial ovarian cancer in both editions of my book, the first and the second, this video will really enhance your understanding of it. It's really best to use both the book and these videos. Then you really get a thorough education. All right. In the last video, you learned that your ovaries exist only for the purpose of reproduction. After that, they have no purpose. And that single fact is one of the most important things you will learn in this entire unit. Your ovaries go from being fertile to being infertile. They go from being full of estrogen to being devoid of estrogen. They go from being a bustling business to being a bankrupt business. But what I want to address today is the entire cycle of your ovaries from one extreme to the other. There's more to the cycle of your ovaries than just the two extremes. In the breast cancer unit, you learned that your breasts have a cycle. Well, the same is true for your ovaries. They both have a cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this blue cycle here to demonstrate the normal cycle of your ovaries throughout your entire lifetime. And remember, your lifetime and your ovaries' lifetime are two completely different time frames. You live a lot longer than your ovaries do. That's precisely why menopause exists at all for human females. We outlive our ovaries. Other animals do not. So be sure to take that into account in studying the life cycle of your ovaries. Because we will be describing your ovaries from your birth until your death, we'll start with your ovaries at birth and we'll proceed chronologically. So, the first phase of your ovaries is your ovaries from birth until puberty. We'll call this entire time frame pre-puberty. So the first phase of your ovaries is your prepubertal ovaries. You've already learned that you're born with all the eggs you're ever going to have. Your prepubertal ovaries contain over 1 million eggs that are completely dormant and immature. And your sex hormones have not arrived on the scene yet, so there's no activity whatsoever going on in your ovaries. Because the eggs are dormant and immature, your prepubertal ovaries are tiny, teeny, weeny little things. They're just boring little blobs, small and smooth, sitting in your pelvis, doing absolutely nothing. And this phase of dormant, immature, inactive ovaries lasts from birth until puberty begins. So we're going to take our cycle and we're going to put our prepubertal ovaries here, and we're going to label it birth to puberty. So prepuberty is when your ovaries are small. But then puberty hits, and man, does life start happening in your ovaries. They become party central. All sorts of things change. Now, instead of just remaining small and inactive all the time, your ovaries start their monthly cycle. So you start having an ovarian monthly cycle within the larger ovarian life cycle. This monthly cycle is what I described to you in the last video. Instead of the persistently small, tiny, inactive state of your prepubertal ovaries, which are like this, your ovaries become plump. No longer are they dormant. They go to work, and the egg and hormone factories open its doors for business. There are signs of activity even on the external surfaces, which are, look at this, they're now rough rather than smooth. So we're going to put our now pubertal ovaries on our cycle and label it puberty. So now our cycle has your prepubertal ovaries and your pubertal ovaries. So the cycle is coming together. And now that your ovaries have become plump, you're ready to start having your periods or menstrual cycles. Now each menstrual cycle is divided into two halves. In the first half, with the stimulation of estrogen, one single egg begins to mature, and it gets larger and larger, causing your entire ovary to swell. You know, when I was making these props, I struggled so much in trying to get an egg into this balloon. There's an egg inside this balloon, really an egg. And I kept trying to stretch the balloon opening enough to fit the egg. And as I struggled, I thought, maybe I should just use a condom instead of a balloon. And then I thought, well, perhaps if I just roll the balloon onto the egg, in the same way you roll a condom onto a penis, turning the balloon inside out in the process, it might just work. And voila, it did. So we're going to place this balloon on our cycle because it's the next phase of the process. But day 14 of your cycle is the day when the egg matures enough to ovulate. But in the process of maturation, it forms a swelling, an absolutely normal swelling. So it gets bigger. So instead of having this, you have this. It's an enlargement, a swelling of the ovary. This is called an ovulatory cyst. An ovulatory cyst is a normal swelling of your ovary that consists of a mature egg surrounded by clear fluid. It develops as a result of the normal process of preparing an egg for ovulation. So, if we were to depict this on a big model ovary, it would look like this. We would have this. An egg preparing to ovulate. Okay, so we've got that now on our cycle, and we're going to leave it here and put it as the first half of the cycle. So now we have this on our cycle. Now, on approximately day 14, the egg erupts from the ovary. So then we have our egg. But on our little cycle here, I'm going to leave this as an ovulatory cyst because remember, the egg goes down the fallopian tube and we are talking about the ovaries. So we're going to keep our ovarian cycle intact. So that's why I'm leaving the ovulatory cyst on our demonstration cycle. This is going to be pertinent to later parts of this lesson. Now, the release of the egg from your ovary marks the end of the first half of your cycle. So we're going to put our label here for the first half of the cycle. We've got the label here for this. And then the ovulatory cyst disappears and we move on to the second half of the cycle. But even though the large egg is no longer present in your ovary, the site where it developed now takes on the job of producing progesterone to support a pregnancy should the egg get fertilized. So that follicle bed starts to swell into a corpus luteum. And it forms a different kind of absolutely normal swelling. So this corpus luteum is now in the spot where the egg erupted. And it's going to form a whole different kind of swelling called a corpus luteum cyst. A corpus luteum cyst is a cyst that forms at the site of the corpus luteum after ovulation of the egg. And the job of the corpus luteum is to continue producing progesterone to support the pregnancy. And it prepares to stay around and do the job of supporting the pregnancy. So it becomes a permanent fixture should you get pregnant. If we were to depict the corpus luteum cyst on our big model ovary, it would look like this. So your already plump ovary has already formed two completely normal swellings in the course of just one single cycle. The ovulatory cyst in the first half of the cycle and the corpus luteum cyst in the second half of the cycle. Now, at this point, there's a fork in the road. I mean, you're either going to get pregnant or you're not going to get pregnant. So what happens to your ovarian cycle in each of these two scenarios? Well, if you do get pregnant, which is what Mother Nature intended, the corpus luteum cyst remains in your ovary. And it gets even bigger. In fact, until the placenta develops and takes over the job of producing progesterone to support the pregnancy, the corpus luteum cyst is a real progesterone factory all by itself. So this is our pregnancy wheel now. And because your corpus luteum cyst stays around to support a pregnancy, it goes on the cycle. It alone is that pregnancy's lifeline. Now, if we put that on our big model ovary, it's going to look like that. Kind of monstrous, doesn't it? Okay, you can think of this corpus luteum cyst as a temporary cradle. You already know that your uterus is the actual baby carriage, but this corpus luteum cyst is what carries the baby until the baby carriage is completely cushioned by a placenta. So, we're going to add a cradle next to this corpus luteum cyst, like that. Now, after 3 or 4 months of pregnancy, the corpus luteum cyst will start to shrink because the placenta takes over and it has the job of producing progesterone. And then, throughout the duration of the entire pregnancy and the entire time you breastfeed, your ovarian cycle ceases completely. Kaput. Gone. Your ovaries are essentially passive. They do not resume their monthly cycles until breastfeeding ends. So pregnancy gives your ovaries a great big vacation from the constant cycle of egg production. And so we can put this stop sign on our cycle. And so we're going to label this entire cycle the pregnancy cycle. I'm going to try to fit this in there somewhere so that you know that this one is pregnancy. And obviously with the cradle and the stop sign, that's obvious. If you have multiple pregnancies, your ovaries cycle through these prolonged, completed cycles again and again and again. With pregnancy, 3 critical things occur. The corpus luteum cyst gets larger. The corpus luteum cyst lingers for months, and the entire ovarian cycle stops for the duration of the pregnancy and any breastfeeding that follows. Now, what happens if you don't get pregnant? Well, that's a whole different ovarian cycle. So now we're going to use a yellow cycle to describe not getting pregnant. Of course, you're still going to have the same prepubertal ovaries that are small, smooth, and dormant from birth to puberty, so we can put those on our cycle. And you're still going to have puberty, which is ovaries that are plump and wrinkled, so we're going to put those on our cycle. So far we have both birth to puberty and puberty, just like the other cycle. And you're still going to start your first period. So the first half of your cycle is going to cause one egg to mature. So we have our ovulatory cyst again. And the second half of your cycle still causes that corpus luteum cyst to form. So we put that on our cycle. But then, since you didn't get pregnant, the rest of the ovarian cycle is aborted. So that's why we have our no pregnancy sign across here. Now, what's going to happen now is you're going to just start this whole cycle all over again. You're not going to go back to puberty, but you're going to skip all of this stuff that you had in this other cycle in the lower half below the pregnancy sign. The corpus luteum won't get bigger. It won't form the cradle or support a pregnancy, and you won't have that stop sign where the ovaries get a vacation. So you skip all that. Okay, and your ovaries are just going to return to their pre-pregnant plump state, and then these 3 steps are going to go over and over and over again. So you're going to have these 3 steps only. The longer you evade pregnancy, the more aborted cycles you'll have. So you end up with one aborted cycle after another. But by aborting one cycle after another, you are defying Mother Nature's plan. This is what Mother Nature intended. She intended for you to just repeat this pregnancy cycle over and over and over again. But by having one menstrual cycle after another, your ovaries never get the hiatus, the break, the vacation that they get with pregnancy. They are on the job, running the factory 24/7, month after month, year after year. So either way, your ovaries have a life cycle. But with pregnancy, the life cycle is complete. And with no pregnancy, the cycle is incomplete. From puberty to post-menopause, your ovaries start the cycle over and over again. What differs is whether the cycle is extended and completed by cycling through pregnancy or aborted and restarted by evading pregnancy. If you have many pregnancies, your ovaries have fewer cycles, but they have more completed cycles. If you have few or no pregnancies, your ovaries have many more cycles, but they are incomplete cycles. The thing to recognize is that your ovaries demonstrate a lot of normal swellings, most of which are two types, ovulatory cysts and corpus luteum cysts. And then finally we get to postmenopause. This is by definition when your ovaries get to go out of business. They stop producing both eggs and hormones, and the entire factory closes down. And this is going to occur with either one of these cycles. Both are going to end with postmenopause. So, your ovaries will no longer serve a purpose. Now, other animals die at this point. Mother Nature sees no reason to keep them alive once their ovaries die, but we humans defy the laws of Mother Nature. So our ovaries die while we get to go on living. Well, what do you suppose dead ovaries look like? Well, they look like most dead things, shriveled and dried up. So like tiny, tiny, tiny little raisins. At postmenopause, your ovaries should get so small and shriveled that they are barely even there. Your doctor should not be able to feel them on your pelvic exam. The radiologist should not be able to see them clearly on an ultrasound. They should be dead, 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 dead. No longer should they be plump. No longer should they be swollen. No longer are swellings a normal circumstance. Never. There is no situation in which a swollen ovary is normal at any point during your post-menopausal life. Your shriveled post-menopausal ovaries should just sit quietly in your pelvis, barely visible, definitely not palpable, and never, ever making their presence known. So we're going to add our shriveled little ovaries to both cycles. So here we have the shriveled dead ovaries on our pregnancy cycle. Shriveled dead ovaries, this is the gravestone sign. And the same thing happens here. Okay? So you can see that over the course of their lifetime, your ovaries go from small to swollen to shriveled. And once you are postmenopausal, the only one of the three that is acceptable is shriveled. For your summary, I've made a little chart, but I hope you retain the mental images from this demonstration that you've seen here today. The chart is really simple. Across the top row, I've listed the different phases of your ovarian life cycle chronologically. And in the first column, I've listed the characteristics that change from phase to phase. And then in all the cells, I've inserted the descriptive information that I've delivered about each one during this tutorial. The chart is available at menopausetailor.me, and it's also available via the link in the description box. So now that you understand that certain ovarian swellings are normal during your reproductive life, and that no ovarian swelling is ever normal during your postmenopausal life, you're ready to learn about the different kinds of cells that are inside your ovaries. So that's what we'll address next week. In the meantime, you can find me on all sorts of social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Stories, TikTok. You can subscribe right here, and you can certainly schedule a consultation with me at menopausetailor.me. And with that, I will see you again in a week.